Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh,
Sound like you're introducing yourself.
hi, I'm Diana Classy. I'm Master Gardener here in South Dakota, and I do vertical gardening. So I'm gonna share with what I do. How many of you do vertical gardening? Growing your plants up? Well, good. Then you guys can throw some ideas in too. This is the way I used to garden. How many of you garden like this? A big, well, mine wasn't big. Yeah, yeah. And so I used to garden. It's slow. And because I lived in an area, I moved here about 7 years ago. I lived in an area where we got torrential rains. I mounded everything, put walkways in between, mulched a lot with straw. Here's how I garden now. This is what, if you came to my property, this is what you would see. I garden a lot of stuff up. See, you can see the screens that I was talking about that I put on these things. Remember that. Vertical gardening, per what this gentleman said, is an innovative, effortless way of highly producing a productive growing system that uses bottom-up, top-down supports for a wide range of plants in both small and large gardens. So I garden this way because I don't have a lot of room to garden. Why would you want a vertical garden? Anybody have any ideas? This is audience participation.
More yield.
More yield, that's
Get things off the ground where the disease lives.
Yep. 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 You can have a smaller footprint instead of having your vines everywhere. You don't have to prepare as much soil because you have a smaller footprint to work with. You don't have a big 50 by 50 area that you need to work with. You can plant more varieties in a smaller space. Anybody think of less weeding? Yeah, less weeding. I like that. Less maintenance because you're not working a big plot. And because you're growing up, you get good air circulation. That helps with diseases. We'll talk about that too. This is the part I like. Less bending. And you can achieve a lot of higher yield. I'm able to can a lot of cans of beans because I grow them up. And here's some ideas for some supports. You see one of them, the lower left-hand corner, that's just a chain link fence. I don't have a chain link fence in my yard, but I do have fencing. So that's a way you can use it. It looks like they just took in the upper left, it looks like they just took some rabbit fence and made a launch out of it. Here's what I use. That really is a box spring with the fabric taken off of it. we found, and someone had already taken the fabric off, and I saw that, and I said, "Darn, go get that quick." And then I like to grow my peas just on lattice work. Here's how I grow my green beans. Do you see the X? Okay, watch in some of the next pictures, and you'll see how I plant my green beans on that. Aha, there you see it. Do you see the X again? In the center, that's my pole beans. Do you see how I planted them on the X? They're just 42 by 42 inch squares. We've got 6 of them, and I'm able to grow everything I need and can plenty of stuff. Okay, here's a vegetable you can grow up, your pole beans. And when I first thought about pole beans, all I ever thought about was the flat pods. My husband doesn't like flat pod beans, but we love the round pod beans. And there's several different varieties you can grow. The easiest ones to find locally are the Blue Lake ones, but if you look in some of the seed catalogs, you'll see that there's several different round pod pole beans that you can grow.
We have rattlesnake beans, and those are also round pod pole beans.
Okay. She knows what we have. Yeah. You can grow flat pot beans. I've had them. I like them. My husband doesn't, so I don't grow them. Lima beans, a lot of dried beans that you would dry and cook for bean soup or something like that. They are pole beans too. And there's my pole beans. They are taller than I am. And do you see? We'll talk about this later, but there's drip irrigation going to it. Let's go forward. There we go. And here's a story I have for you. I have a friend who travels in the summertime, and oftentimes she travels when her bush beans are coming in. So she tells me, you can pick all you want and can them if you want. You don't have to save them for me. Backache City. We don't get backaches when we pick our beans because they're up like this. There might be a few down here, but most of them are up here. And sometimes I have to stand on my tippy toes to get to some of them. And last year I canned 30 pints, I think, of beans. So we get plenty. I grew my cucumbers up. These should have been picked sooner. But you can grow pickling cucumbers and your slicers up there. Last year I even tried some Oriental ones, the long skinny ones. We weren't really fond of them, but it's all a taste. And there's what they grew up to. Once again, I had to stand on my tippy toes to get some of them. And when you start the binding things, you do have to kind of encourage them sometimes. They'll want to grow this way, and you have to encourage them and tell them no, they need to grow up. So the first getting them started up, you kind of have to help them a little bit with the beans too. And I didn't have any rotten cucumbers because they were sitting on the ground and it rained or anything like that. So get them up off the ground. Melons. Yes, you can grow cantaloupe and small. I would grow the great big watermelons. The little sugar babies, they would grow fine. They may need a sling. And here's my inspiration picture coming up. Do you like that? That was in a botanical gardens in Pennsylvania we went to. But do you see how little ground space that takes? Just a little corner, and then you get this beautiful melon. And I think there was more than one. Yeah, there's another one in there too. That was my inspiration to grow up. Peas can grow up. They like to do that. And this particular picture looks like they put it on chicken wire. Like I said, you saw the little lattice work that I grow my peas up. You can grow all kinds of peas. I usually grow the edible pod ones because then you kind of get more for your money there. And here's support you could grow them on that looks like a teepee. Have you ever thought about growing sweet potatoes up? You can do that too because they're a vine. You can vine them up and just have your potatoes in the ground and the vines are up off the ground. So they're not taking all your garden space. I do a lot of volunteer work out at the community garden, and I have seen big plots where it's just sweet potato vines all over the place, but they could have maybe grown them up and had room for something else too. And you can grow pumpkins and squash up too. I grow pie pumpkins up. In fact, that's one of my pie pumpkins. Remember the box springs? That's where I grow my pumpkins. The box springs is under there. You can see just a little corner of it, but that's the box springs. And you will have to support them. I save the bags that onions come in. They work perfect. I just put the baby pumpkin in there and kind of tie it onto the support, and then as the pumpkin grows, the bag is giving the pumpkin support, so it's not putting too much weight on the vine. But once again, I wouldn't recommend those It's like this. That probably wouldn't work. Tomatoes, they don't really vine, but they, the indeterminate do get really tall. This is my tomato cage. I like it because it goes flat, but it's really sturdy. You know, you can get lots of tomato cages that just don't have it. This one does really well, and I'm not sure if you remember seeing in the picture, but I like to protect my tomatoes. My dad did too. My dad used to remember those old screens that you would have to take the screen off at the end of the summer and put on the storm windows? My dad saved those screens, and he would build this thing over his tomatoes and it would be screen on top because we lived in Rapid City, and you know you get hail like this. Well, we don't seem to get hail very much, and I'm very thankful for that. But just in case, if you remember some of the pictures back, there was a little screen over this. So what I do is when I plant my tomato, I have a screen which they call hardware cloth. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say hardware cloth? It's like a screen, but it's got bigger holes in it. So I put the screen here, and as the plant goes up, it goes higher and higher. And by the time it gets to here, if the tomato will come out the top, I take that off and I say to the tomato, well, now you're outgrown.
You trim your tomatoes back out ever?
Pardon?
You trim your tomatoes back ever?
I will take out the suckers when they're small. I'll take the suckers out, but then after a while, it's like, okay. And I have seen tomatoes grow espalier. The Amish in Maryland and Pennsylvania would grow them where they would have they would put up stakes and they would plant their tomatoes in between the stakes, and then they would take cord and wrap it this way, and the tomatoes would not have a stake like this. They would be very upright. I tried that once, and I think they must plant their tomatoes closer together because mine got sunburned on them, the sun scald. But you can grow them that way. Yes. You grow them that way?
No, I plant my tomatoes. We've done this for a long time. You know, we'll put the plants in, and I always put cans on my tomatoes or my old coffee cans.
We're going to talk about that in a minute too.
But when we get rid of that, then we put stakes in that are X. We exit at the plant, and then we exit at the next plant, and we lay like chicken wire in between there down to the bottom where the tomato plant is at. We'll tie, I use the quilting. I use my scraps, and then I tie at the bottom and at the top. And I say there's no wind in South Dakota that can ruin those tomato plants.
Wow, you got them that secured.
And then I do have to take, and after a while, because they're at the top, I have to nip the flowers away, which you really don't want to do because you're killing that little tomato that would be coming. But I have to cut those back so that they quit growing and start producing tomatoes. But anyway, that has worked for us. And we're kind of trolleys in them, we're supporting them, and
Getting them up off the ground. Because I've seen like I said, at the community garden, I've seen a lot of people that don't support their tomatoes and they just let them grow on the ground. And then if we get a good rain or something, then you're losing a lot of your produce because they're sitting on that ground and they rot. Yeah, yes.
If you get that cage.
This I got about 5 years ago. I did get it from Bob Garza. I don't know if they still carry them. Because like I said, I got it about 5 years. This has had 5 years of use, and it's still really sturdy. Yeah. So they may still have them this spring. I'm not really sure. Oh, let's go this way. Oh, I brought this because my husband said that picture was really bad. He's my manager. Okay, what about non-vining plants? What do you think we could do with the ones that don't grow up? Well, there's a room for them as a foundation plant. They're going to be planted in front of the climbing plants. And they can work as a ground cover, like if you're going to plant something like lettuces or something like that that are going to fill out, they can work as a ground cover. And that kind of helps control the weeds. Some plants can be supports for other plants. And remember, you need to keep in mind, and we're going to talk about this later, what plants like to grow together and what plants don't like to grow together. So we'll talk about that because that's important with some of the things that you might consider using as foundation plants in front of or with some of your climbing things. Here's a good picture of that theory in place. As you can see, there's some kind of a cabbage family planted in front of the bean tower, and it looks like there's some chard, maybe, but they're using their space to plant their non-vining or their non-climbing plants, vegetables with the climbing ones. So some of them are root vegetables. We've got beets and radishes and carrots and onions. And like I said, we're going to talk about companion plants on which ones of these like to be planted together and which ones don't. Some of your foundation plants can be your leafy lettuce plants or your cabbage family. Here's some that, remember Three Sisters? I'm sure you guys have heard of Three Sisters, the way the Native Americans planted, where they planted the corn, and then they planted the beans that would climb up the corn, and the squash that would cover the ground and work as ground cover. So those are three things you know you can plant together. They like to be together. Okra, you can save your okra plant, not cut it down in the fall, and you could probably use it to grow some sweet peas on there, because they don't grow quite so tall. And okra plants can grow. Well, they can grow this tall. Mine only usually grow about this tall, but don't tell me how many of you don't like. How many of you like okra? Okay. Those of you that haven't tried it don't know what you're missing. Other foundation plants, the eggplants, peppers of the nightshade family. Now let's talk about companions, because this is important. If we're going to use some of our non-climbing plants with our climbing plants, some like to grow together and some don't. So peas, they're happy to be with the cabbage family, carrots, corn, radish, but they don't like the onion family, and they don't like potatoes. Full beans like to grow with corn, squash, well, Three Sisters, right? Corn, squash, cucumbers, radishes, carrots, but they don't like the onion family and the cabbage family. And you never want to grow beets with your beans because they starve each other out. They both go after the same nutrient, so you don't want to do that. Melons, they like kind of corn, sunflowers, tomatoes, but they don't like potatoes. How about squash? Okay, there's corn again because the Three Sisters, remember? Legumes, the bean flat family, and radish. They don't like potatoes either. Cucumbers, they like peas and beans and cabbage. Nightshade family, you know what the nightshade family is? It's tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, potatoes, yeah. Yep. Well, now, but they don't like potatoes. They like the other nightshade. Beets, don't ever plant beets with your pull beans. They work okay with your green beans, with your bush beans, but not pull beans. Tomatoes love basil, but they don't like other nightshade families, and that's because the nightshade family is going to have the same kind of pests, and they're going to have the same kind of requirements for their nutrients. And I'm going to give you some, at the end, I'll give you some places you can go to get the companion plantings. Okay, let's talk about, okay, we know that there's going to be less weeds, less watering, less all that kind of stuff, but we still do need to maintain the garden. So controlling weeds, mulch. Mulch is your friend. Whether you use a non-organic mulch, such as white plastic, you would use the white plastic for your cool your cool season crops, your lettuces, your peas and stuff like that to keep the soil cooler. The black plastic is going to be for your warm season crops, your tomatoes, your green beans and things like that. They want the warmer soil. And you can always use landscape fabric, the kind that is porous so that the rain is going to go down through it. Organic, this is what I like to use. Grass clippings, as long as you know they're not been treated with herbicide, don't want to use those. I'll tell you a story about that. I was at like I said, I spent a lot of time talking with the gardeners out at the community garden. And one gentleman said, "What's wrong with my tomato plant?" And I looked at the tomato plant and then I looked down and I said, "Do you know where you got your grass clippings?" He said, I got them from the neighbor. And I said, "Does your neighbor use that herbicide, that granular herbicide?" He wasn't sure. But I was pretty sure that was what was wrong with his tomato plant. And I just said, let's keep it watered and take that grass clippings away and let's see what happens. And it did recover, but there was no guarantee it would because, most of the herbicides that get put down on lawns are broadleaf herbicides. Broadleaf herbicides are vegetables or broadleaf, with the exception of corn. So you want to be careful with that. Newspapers, if you use them, you want to overlap several sheets, and I always water mine so they kind of are stuck down on the ground. So when we get a windy day, they're not over in my neighbor's yard. Straw, once again, straw, you want to make sure that it's not been treated with a certain chemical, which we will touch on at the very end, because there is a chemical out there that will carry through. Yes, sir.
Do you know of a source, good source for locally for straw? Have a hard time finding it. Small bales of straw.
No, I believe it or not, we go to Rapid City about once or twice a year, and I get my straw from there because around here you can get hay, but
Straw is hard to find.
straw is hard to find. Nebraska, I've had friends go down to Nebraska and get it too, down further south. And shredded leaves. And I brought my favorite tools for the weeds that aren't real deep rooted. Something like this will work. You can just kind of scratch them out. For the weeds that are deep rooted, like dandelions, you might want something like these. Those are my two favorite weeding tools. Uh-huh.
I have found that a really good tool for close to your plants is you get one of those, I think it's called a cold meat fork in your silverware, get an old one, and just bend it to near 90 degrees.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. One of those, yeah.
Literally big giant forks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like this, only sharper.
Tiny.
Yeah. Watering. Remember when you water any of your garden, whether you vertical garden or not, you want to water the soil. You want to water the roots, not wet the plant, because wet plants are going to be more prone to certain diseases. This is how I water. I use a 2-gallon. That's not my watering can. I just take a picture of it. But I use a 2-gallon watering can and I get it from my rain barrel. So I am always careful to water the soil, not my plant, because it is rainwater that comes off of my roof. And as you saw in that one picture, when I don't have enough rain barrel water, I have the backup as my emitter hoses. My emitters that are soaker hoses, because they're going to water the ground, the roots, not the rest of the plant. I would strongly discourage you from overhead watering because it wastes a lot of water, number one, and it wets the foliage, so you could open yourself up for certain fungal diseases. And of course, mulch is your friend. It's going to help keep the moisture in the soil for you. Fertilizing. You want to fertilize your vegetable garden carefully because too much nitrogen will give you this wonderful growth and you'll go, where's the tomatoes? I can tell you a story. I had a girlfriend back where I used to live. She grew roses and she would mix up this concoction of organic stuff for her roses because roses are heavy feeders and you want a lot of blooms. And she had extras, so she put them on her tomatoes. Her tomatoes got this tall, but there wasn't a tomato on them at all because all that nitrogen was pushing all that lovely growth. They were beautiful plants, but where's the tomatoes? I'm a big person on organic. I brought something that you can pass around. I just harvested some of my compost. You can smell it. It smells wonderful, but you can't keep it. You'll see that there's still eggshells visible in it. The grass that's in it was because when I was harvesting it, I got some grass along with it. You can, an organic liquid fertilizer is fish emulsion, and I can tell you a story about that too. I had a rabbit in my garden one year. Doggone that rabbit, he would eat the bottom inch off all my beans because I was still doing the bush beans. Well, I would get out there with my fish emulsion and I'd spray my beans down. And as long as it didn't rain, he left them alone because he didn't like the smell of fish. It would rain when that little bunny was back out there. But my beans loved it because it was a nice organic fertilizer. Chemical, there are many on the market. There's, you know, the Miracle-Gro for tomatoes and stuff like that. So there's a liquid formula, and then a lot of people swear by putting 10-10-10, the granular formula fertilizer on their gardens. Once again, just be careful not to get too carried away because you don't want to have this beautiful foliage and no beans or no tomatoes or no cucumbers. Pests. As far as pests, the best prevention is fencing. That's your friend. And don't believe what they say at Menards about rabbit fencing because we put up rabbit fencing and those smart aleck rabbits would climb up and go through the big holes. So we had to enforce our rabbit fencing with chicken wire. Now they can't get in there. Insects, cutworms are one of the big things that I have problems with. And with my tomatoes, when I put my tomatoes out, this is my protection for the cutworms. You put it down into the soil, or at least a half an inch, because cutworms are going to go along the surface of the soil. And you can see what they do. They just cut that little baby plant right off at the soil level. So these, or like I said in here, at one time I did use plastic cups, but I like these better because the tomatoes have more room. And it's, you know what that is? It's a half-gallon milk jug. I cut off the top and the bottom, and there you go. And it's nice and sharp, so it goes into the ground really well. Larger insects, you can do the pick and drop into your container of soapy water. I'm more deadly than that. I do the pick and squish. My husband goes, "Oh, that's so gross," and I said, "It's so satisfying to hear that." And then soft body insects, aphids, for the most part, you can probably control them with a strong blast of your water from your. See, that's one time you would get the foliage wet. Do it early in the morning so it's time, the foliage has time to dry. Or diatomaceous earth will work too. That's a product that's made out of the shells that's ground up so it's really coarse. So caterpillars and stuff like that, when they crawl across it, it kind of rips their bodies and they kind of die a slow painful death, I guess. Diseases. The best way to prevent diseases is going to be to grow resistant varieties. And I'm not sure if I have them here. Usually, if you look on your package, it's going to have some, especially with tomatoes, it's going to have some little letters like V and F and stuff like that, and it will tell you what it's resistant to. For most fungal diseases, you need good air circulation to help prevent them, and you're going to get that if you're growing your vertical because South Dakota has wind. And so because we have wind, we're going to have good circulation. When you do see diseased leaves, if you can get them out of your garden as quickly as possible. No, don't compost them, put them in a bag, get them in the trash can. That's going to help with some of the spread. It's not going to get rid of the disease altogether, but it will help it not to spread so much. And just remember, blossom end rot is not a disease. The best way to take care of it is just to be consistent watering. People will say you need to put more calcium in your soil. We have plenty of calcium in our soil. The problem is getting the soil, getting the plant to bring it up to where it needs to be, and the watering is going to help that. And if you want more information about garden disease, Marlis gave a good talk last July about different garden diseases. And you can go, how do you get to that? It's on like the YouTube for the library.
Is it still on the library page?
To look at the,
Yeah, past
I
people.
would go to YouTube.
Yeah, go to YouTube.
YouTube's easier to find and look at Yankton Community Library and look at Yankton Seed Library.
Okay, we're going to go to something pretty. What kind of vertical gardening flowers? How about some annuals? Morning glories,
Sweet peas.
sweet peas, that's a good one. Let's see what I have here. Yep, I got sweet peas and morning glories. Now, I used to grow my sweet peas on my chain link fence. Made it so pretty. Okay, what about some perennials that you don't have to plant every year?
People moms.
Clematis, that's a favorite. I have clematis, honeysuckle. Now, if you plant ivy, please use it with caution because it can become an invasive real quick. So I personally would not recommend you use ivy, but some people are in love with it. Just make sure you keep it under control. And shrubs, what kind of shrubs? Flowering shrubs. Yeah, roses. That's my first love is roses. That's one I took care of back in Maryland for a client. Okay, so we're going to review here. You can get basically, you can get more produce per square foot if you grow vertically. We talked about the plant problems. It's easier to pick, easier on your back, easier to see. Your pests are going to be at eye level, so you don't have to go like this to see what's getting after your plant. It's going to be up and down. And if you're into artistic landscaping, it's going to add different texture to your yard. And we heard a talk at the Spring Fling. Did anybody go to the Spring Fling where she was saying about you can plant some of your shade loving or your lettuces that you don't want to bolt under some of the supports for your vining things? Here's another way I grow vertically. When we moved into our home here, this is something my kids went together and got for us. It's called a tower garden, and the one to the left, that's in our basement. It has grow lights, and the one to the right is outside. It can have it either way. It's basically hydroponic, but it also has because the water gets shot up to the top and then dribbles down, so there's air involved in it too. No, I don't get any money for showing you these pictures. And how about thinking outside the box? I tried to get a picture of someone growing herbs in a shoe bag container. Remember those that you have all the yeah, crazy. So you think outside the box a little bit, and you can still, I don't know what kind of containers these are, but they are cool. These ones to the right.
Milk containers.
I don't think so, because it's this way and that way, but yeah, those are cool. Another way to garden with limiting spaces is you can always garden in containers, and I've seen people make little trees out of containers that you can garden up in. But Marlis is going to cover that in July or June. She's going to tell you all about how to grow things in containers. Okay, this is what I was telling you about. There is a newer herbicide out there that farmers are using. I talked with a farmer Sunday, and I was asking him about this too. This is the first one is and I can't pronounce it. That's the active ingredient. The brand names, the one I've heard the most of is Grazone. Grazone. It's a long life broadleaf herbicide. They've started using it more based on what this farmer told me because a lot of broadleaf weeds are getting to be resistant to glyphosate, which is what was originally in Roundup. The problem with this broadleaf herbicide is that it can pass through the animals and the manure is still active. The herbicide is still active in the manure. And it can be active in the straw and the hay that they sprayed it on. So you want to use caution when you're mulching with those things. Know where, if you get straw, just like if you get grass clippings, know where they came from, know what they put on those fields. And I wouldn't recommend manure in your vegetable garden, but if you decide to use composted manure, I've used it before where I have a sacrificial plant. And tomatoes are very susceptible to herbicide. So I'll plant one extra tomato seed, and when that grows up, I will put it in straight manure to see if it's got or not. Yes, so that's my sacrificial tomato plant. So kind of take note of the active ingredient, and if you know of people that are using that, be real cautious about straw or manure that you would get from them to compost. Even composted manure, that could still be an active ingredient. I heard a friend tell me that she lived not here, but where I used to live, she lived out in the country, and the farmers around her were using this herbicide. A deer ate from their field, came and used the bathroom in her garden and killed a couple of her tomato plants because of the manure from the deer that still had that active ingredient in it.
To
So
do it to the animal.
it goes through the animal, doesn't hurt them at all. But they're not a plant.
Oh, true, true.
You know, they're not a plant. We could probably eat something that was treated with it too, and it wouldn't bother us because we're not a plant. I wouldn't recommend you do that though.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. So grateful. So what the animals also eat, from my research include, is when whichever area that might be being sprayed by chemical that's produced by Monsanto, that goes into the body, and then that plays a factor also in what comes out the manure.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Yeah. That.
Yeah.
Okay, and here's some resources. I put down 3 places that you can get companion planting things. If I were to, I think the Washington State one is probably the best one, although the Cooperative Extension Foundation, I found some good information from them too. So that's what I can give you about vertical gardening. Does anybody have some other words of wisdom about vertical gardening that I might have missed?
Big question. How
Yeah.
long does that contaminated manure last? Can you recompost it? And
You know, I don't have the answer to that question. That would be something to definitely research. But the fact that it can, that the hay or whatever can be eaten by an animal and it can go through their system, that kind of cautions me too. I know a lot of times, if you let it age long enough, but I don't really have the answer for that. I'm sorry.
It takes years, but I don't remember how many years.
Yeah,
It's
3
not
to 5
just-
years or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's probably 5 years.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, I just have a comment. If anybody's interested in a really nice drip system, they should look at dripdepot.com.
Oh, okay.
They also have a lot of dripdepot.com. And they have a lot of videos on YouTube so you can go look at. I mean, you can set up a fertilizer. You can do each
Yeah.
row individually because there's valves in it.
Mhm.
And you could fertilize just your tomato row.
Water, yeah.
And
I
different
get my stuff from DripWorks. It's,
But you can put a timer on your hydrant and it'll water automatically. You don't have to go do it.
yeah, no, that's how I do mine too, because we put a timer on it, because usually I switch over to my drip irrigation system when I'm not home to get my rain barrel water on them. So you're right, it has a timer and it comes on for so many minutes every few days. And remember, when you water, it's always better to water less often but deeper. So you want to really get it watered. You might only have to water every other twice a week or something like that. But you want to water deep because if you water deep, the roots are going to go deep too. If you water shallow, they're going to stay more shallow. I have this book you can't get here. This is my book. This was one of the resources I use. This is in the library. It has a lot of information that one does, but it goes into a lot of ideas and steps on how to make there was a lot of ideas of how to make your supports. This one has a little bit in about vertical gardening, but it's a great information about growing in small spaces. Let's see. I think that's about all I have. So I thank you for your attention. And I guess you get to go home early. I don't know. Anyone have any more questions?
We had someone that filled out a seed order form and you did not put your name on it. So if you didn't get your seeds that you requested, see us back by the seed cabinet there.
If I don't know if anybody's interested in what they can plant now, but I did print out. This is from the Rodell Encyclopedia of Gardening, and it just has dates close to what I think our average last frost date is right about May 10th. So if you want to come up and look and see what you might be able to plant now, which I think is things like onions, onions, radishes, lettuces, and stuff like that. Thank you.